Today, I'm here with author Carmen Rita Wong to discuss her new book, which launches just this week. Why Didn't You Tell Me? Carmen is a writer and nonprofit board leader whose board positions include the Moth and Planned Parenthood of America. She was the co-creator and television host of On the Money on CNBC and was a national columnist for Glamour, Latina, Men's Health, and Good Housekeeping. Wong is the author of a series of novels and two best-selling advice books. She is the founder and CEO of Malcolm Productions, where she develops female-focused media and entertainment. She currently lives in Manhattan with her daughter. I'm super excited for this chat here today. So thank you, Carmen. I'm super excited for you to be joining me here today for a chat. When Yelena reached out to me and gave me a little bit of a blurb, Yelena, of course, working for the publisher, when she gave me a little bit of blurb about what your book was about, I knew that I was very interested in hearing more about your story. And since the book arrived to my inbox, I quite literally didn't put it down until I finished it. So now I'm super excited to meet you and to dive into your new book, Why Didn't You Tell Me? So thank you for joining me here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. You know, I'm a huge fan. You're so fantastic. I'm such a huge fan. And every time you post, I have a scenario in my life that it applies to. So we're simpatico.
But I'm not surprised to hear. I'm honored to hear. And I saw so much of, like we were chatting a bit before we hit record here today, so much of, I think, the way I think about life and our families and our struggles, you really illustrated all of it. So when you're saying I'm reading the post and I'm kind of pinging it, your memoir did such a really beautiful job at kind of sharing the human journey, illustrating a lot of, again, the struggles, the concepts that I talk about day in and day out.
Yeah.
So before we kind of dive into what's between the pages of this memoir, I know you wrote previous books, I believe, if I'm correct, on finances, I think. So talk to
Yeah.
me about why a memoir, why now, and how did that come to be? Kind of what made the decision for you to put your life story down on these pages?
Yeah, I had a long history in media covering finance. So from a TV show to magazine editor, advice columnist, and then a faculty professor. I've done it all, but I've always wanted to write a memoir um, because I'm one of those people that I didn't see myself or anyone who looked like me, you know, growing up in certain places that I had to live and in the professional spaces I was in, and I was a huge, you know, book fan. I mean, I libraries saved me so much. So I said, you know, my story is actually an incredibly American story because people would say to me, they say, "Oh, you're Latina, you're Chinese, you're this, you're that." And this is such an American story, and I felt like if I told it, then other people could tell their story too, and we could see how different yet together we are in so many ways. And the other thing, Nicole, you know this about people and their psychology. Sometimes you just have a compulsion. You have not a compulsion, you have a to use it pregnant with it. Like you're just like it's in you and it has to happen and it has to come out. And then years went by, and then about 5 years ago, I was like, that's it. This is what I'm doing. I'm focusing on it. Thank goodness I was in a position to be able to do that. And I wanted to leave it as a legacy to my daughter. But a lot of things happened in life. And of course, the pandemic, which made it go faster because life is so precious and we're not getting any younger. So
Uh,
the privilege of aging is happening. So I wanted to make sure to get it down.
well, we're the collective. I can speak for them a bit here.
Yeah.
Is very appreciative, and I'm so inspired to see people like yourself really stepping into, like you're saying, it just my story needed to be told, and my hope was that people would hear the resonance or the similarity in it, and very much emblematic and descriptive of my own journey, where I think that there's a lot about my story that does kind of ping the similar, no matter where you're living. Of course, we're located here in the States, but regardless of
Yeah.
where in the world you are, I think
Yeah.
the overwhelming initial response that I got as I myself started sharing my part of my story that I, of course, thought I was so different around was how similar, to speak to
Sure.
your very beautifully
Yeah.
made point. I think that we ultimately all are. So, what was it like then, I guess, as you began to sit down and write the process of, I guess, putting your story down in paper? Was it a comfortable, kind of natural process because it had been so alive in thought for you? Or was, I guess, there anything surprising that came up for you as you journeyed
Well,
through then putting the pen to paper?
yeah, I mean, I've always been a writer since I was a kid. I've always written, but and maybe we'll get into it. I could not keep a diary. So I very much kept a diary in my head. And I made sure to remember things, to replay things, to connect things in my head. But what happened in the past several years is, well, 15 years of weekly therapy, Nicole, which is a big privilege to say, but
Mhm.
that was such a change. When you click with someone, when you connect with someone, when you do the work, as he would say to me, yeah, but you did the work. People can just show up and take the appointment. You have to work at it. And that's what I did is I just constantly and consistently was like, I'm going to get at the bottom of this. I'm going to figure this out, kind of like crack the mystery of my life and my mother's life and how we all ended up here and see her as a separate person with her as not just my parent, but a separate human being with her own past, her own trauma, her own wants and needs. Because when we have a difficult relationship with a parent, we can't really see past it, right? She had passed away many years ago, but I was like, I needed to see past that. So I did a lot of work to do that. And once I did that, like the connections, Nicole, they flowed.
Yeah.
They really just everything kind of fit together very
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, so symbolic of, I think, coming into that alignment really does then translate into the connections, the ease, I think, outward. And I love actually kind of starting here because I noted some quotes. I think I shared with you when we got started. I'm such a big quote person, and I think this quote right here. So you say, "Funny the things we don't want to see once we're grown, even the facts in our hands, or we don't see because we have zero curiosity to explore things further." Because we trust the word of others, ones we're supposed to be able to trust. And I think this is a great place to jump off because I think what you're describing in these lines is the process, or the way my brain translates it is the process
Mhm.
of becoming conscious. Like you're saying, becoming conscious to this separate being that is my mother, and ultimately the relationship and Carmen's experience of that relationship. And I think a lot of us do have those blinders on for many, many different reasons that make it difficult. And the time at which we come to consciousness about all of these different things happens at a different part of our life. Though, as far as I'm concerned, that's where we begin the journey of creating change. So, can you say a little bit more about kind of how it was for you, the things that, when you came to the awareness, I guess, that you weren't seeing some sort of things in your own life?
Yeah, well, your subconscious really picks up on things, right? Your
Yeah.
whole life. And my subconscious, I was always one of those, when you're raised in trauma, you're a hyper aware person and
Yes.
always a little hyper aware, not so much aware of myself, however, or my own feelings or my gut, not really listening to that. But as I got older, it kind of started to build. And then those feelings of there's something wrong, there's something different, there's something people aren't telling me. We all want to trust our parents. Nobody wants to think about their parents. I even hate to say it out loud, be liars, right? Or
Mhm.
making up stories. Nobody wants to think that. It's very, very hurtful because why would they do such a thing to you? But I had to go there. And then it was presented to me. Like it just all kind of came at me. But to your point about consciousness, as I did that, as I listened to that voice more and as I put these things together, let me tell you, you just see things so much more clearly and with a lot less pain. It's not that it's not painful, it's that it doesn't become the top note. It's like understanding that person as a person. And I was just very tired of living in anger. Nicole, anger is vicious. I mean, when I first found out the secret, um, I drank too much, I partied too much, I was angry all the time. And I really had to deal with that. And dealing with that was an enormous difficult thing to do, but I did because it was scary and it's not fun to live with.
And that's what you're describing. I think Carmen is such a beautiful representation of how adaptive we are. We grow up in environments with circumstances, and all of this, unconsciously is registering, is impacting us. And to speak to your point, when we are in that state of dependency, we need some version of a connected caregiver to show up for us, right? And we do then confuse trust and love and the dynamics of that relationship for our reality, because that's all it is. It becomes the reality that we're living in. And all the while behind the scenes, underneath, piling up our, emotions and adaptations and maybe self-harming or other harming patterns that we are coping with everything that is still below the surface. But some of us that get so good at distracting ourselves, at living in those adaptive patterns, that we do feel, somewhat blindsided, or life does meet us with an opportunity not to look away this one time. And then we have to, I think, kind of settle into what is so. And from that place, can you tell me a little bit more about what you said when you talked about it being painful, but not as painful? What was that shift? Can you kind of verbalize what that was for you?
Oh gosh. I think it was spending the time and the attention to really seeing, how should I say this? It's like you once you do see your parents as separate people, which I'm sure takes time and maturity and work and all of that, you you can't help but let go of some of that anger because they're human beings like yourself.
Mhm,
And who
mhm,
hasn't done stupid, horrible things? Also, too, my parents were of a different generation where, you know, we do tend to be products of our generation
mhm.
and our the generational trauma that's handed down. We can make a choice to make things different, but I would say that, becoming very aware of who she was, what she went through, and sitting in her pain, right? And a big part of that was writing down and examining what her life had been like. What was it like to move from a very close Dominican family in Harlem to New Hampshire,
Mm.
which was like another planet
Wow.
for her back then? No family, none of the food she loves, none of the music she loved, none of the people, nothing, completely isolated. And she was such a smart, spunky woman.
Mhm.
And, I could put myself in that. And I was like, my God, like, it's terrible. Did she deal with it the right way? No, no, but I understand it. I don't know, however, yet, which maybe we'll get to. I'm still grappling with some not so great feelings about on the other parent side.
Mm.
I'm still grappling.
Right.
I think that's going to take time. Sometimes it takes time.
Of of course, of course. And I
Yeah.
think you're describing the process. This isn't a light bulb, right? We don't read a
Yeah.
book about, generational or intergenerational, habits and patterns, or like you're saying, cultures, and kind of just embody then that as our truth. It is the process of shifting from, right, my parent as, and I think what you're describing really beautifully is my parent as human, separate from my parent as their behaviors, as their
Yes.
actions in
Yes.
relationship with me. And then
Exactly.
therefore how all of that impacted me and what
Right.
I'm carrying with me, right? If we can create just a little bit of separation, that is a human that was
Yes.
acting in ways, doesn't minimize the deep pain, the deep hurt, the trauma that, some of us are carrying with us, though it does create a bit of that separation. And I think that's an incredibly important part of our own healing journey too, where we separate ourselves, right, from our
Yeah.
own actions. Because a lot of us might even have in our wake a lot of, again, self other harming,
Mhm.
consequences that we've then merged with. We've now become the bad person who does bad things. And healing can, I think, begin when we just put a little bit of space in there in a compassionate way, that we are a human who, for many different reasons, again, based in typically our, and then therefore our parents' past experiences with their own caregivers, do act in ways that can be painful. However, again, it doesn't have to be who we are at our core.
Exactly. This is something I'm trying to teach my daughter. She's 15 years old. And it's really hard, as you know, at that age in adolescence, and you're really you internalize a lot. And if
Uh,
you do bad things, you think you're a bad person and everything's black or white, everything's bad
yes.
and good. And it takes some training out of that. But listen, Nicole, if I can give this to her as a gift for the rest of her life early, whereas
Mhm.
it took me decades like that, then I'm very, very pleased. To have at least partially stopped that cycle.
What a great gift too. And I also want to honor you're right in, I think, the very important developmental age, because they're actually before age 7, 8,
Yep.
um, the way our brains are structured and develop as a little developing human, we can't understand the maturity or the complexity of this conversation. We are very black and white. Bad
Yep.
things happen because bad people,
Mhm.
do bad things. And so children don't have the ability in their actual brain to see this separation or this distinction until, again, they're in adolescence and into their teenage years. So anyone listening to this, that has little ones out there, really honoring that it is really difficult for a toddler to create that separation when they are reprimanded. Their mind does make sense of it that they've gotten in trouble because they are a bad child. And again, the more consistently then that happens, some of us age into adulthood with that
Mhm.
deep rooted belief that we are bad at our core. So the gift you're giving
Yeah.
your daughter in her teenage years is really foundational, because chances are, if she's human like the rest of us, there might
Yes.
be unsavory things that she chooses to do, or reacts
Right.
into the future, though creating that separation really is that shame spiral that I think many of us can get stuck
Yes.
in,
Yes.
or right, the ability to show up differently in the next moment.
Yep. For
I
sure.
want to go into another quote, another piece that you wrote in there, as we're kind of diving into now relationships and how impactful. Because when we're talking about the subconscious, a lot of what we're talking about is all that we learned in our relationships with others, from our beliefs to our own ability to navigate our own emotions, to our own ability to navigate our own relationships. And
Yep.
if you listen to my work a lot, you'll hear
Yeah.
me often locate that right in those early relationships. So you speak of your mom, and
Mm.
you begin by saying, I became terrified of her, though I loved her and needed her so, as we do our mothers. When Lupe was sad, she could turn angry in an instant. The mom who sat by my bedside all night when I had terrors was now the one standing over me as I sat on my bed, screaming that I was ungrateful and so many other things, that it all turned into a jumble of sharp words I couldn't hear but could only file away into boxes in my mind, close the lids, push to the back, and seal shut. I filed the boxes of fear and pain in my mind, but the tremors they made within their confines escaped in the form of constant anxiety and self harm. Again, just the picture that you painted in that, and the resonance that I feel in terms of this deep rooted, visceral feelings of whether it's anxiety, anger, sadness, again, all imprinted and living biologically, physiologically within us. Again, all often a byproduct of those very, very, very early relationships that we're not even conscious of until we begin
Yeah.
to, I think, look and experience them in this new way.
And this is something you talk about a lot about, when you put those things away, they will surface, right? And they will surface in behaviors. They
Yes.
will surface in choices that you make, sometimes not very good choices. And one of the things is, as I was writing that, it's like I was really thinking, it helped me to think that of that filing of boxes, right? Of putting those boxes away, and how they kind of, if you like, let's say you're a hoarder and you only have so much space, right? And you feel it, and they all start falling on you. It's like those are the really horrible parts of your life where you're just over the top because you have to face everything that you've packed away. I was trying to survive. And this
Mhm.
is one thing that I've done too with this book is I used to feel incredibly guilty for a lot of the decisions that I've made. I felt bad that I've had a couple bad marriages. I felt shame because of some things, drinking too much or doing this too much, that too much. And I realized, like, I was a kid. trying to survive and parenting myself and my siblings and my parents. I did the best that I could. It's kind of amazing that I didn't completely destruct, So filing those things away, it's been years of unpacking, but I can tell you the relief, the weight, and the veil that's in front of you that you kind of see through this that makes you do bad, see people in different ways and ways that you shouldn't, and accept people in your life you shouldn't. When all of this kind of is cleared, it's amazing. Like I feel I had a period of where I describe it as, when you have the little spinny thing on your computer,
Mhm.
like rebooting. Like I'm like doing a hardware upgrade. This is not just software. It's like a hardware upgrade of like rebooting. So I felt a little unstable or a little kind of to myself and a little inward, but I also felt like I was floating, and it became a very physical sensation. And I just see so much more clearly because now I know why. It's like, oh, why am I feeling myself attracted to that person? Hey, 1 second, 1 second, that sort of thing. Hold up, where is that coming from? Um, it's kind of tremendous, and that really helped me write this book for sure.
Well, I think what you're very beautifully, Carmen, describing is healing, and I really simplify healing as I often simplify things into two main steps. And the first step is what I call the awareness piece, right? The coming to consciousness, the seeing the things as they are, the habits, the patterns. So, like you're beautifully describing, yeah, I've done a lot of things as a coping mechanism from this very early overwhelming environment where I was given, where I needed to assume responsibilities that were completely, above my maturity level. Yet, as we all do, we adapted, and you did just that. And the byproduct of that, well into your adult years, are all of these behaviors that don't serve me. For a lot of us, that in and of itself is the healing, because we might have been carrying shame, or again harboring that deep belief that, what, all of this wasn't because I'm adapted to an environment. It's because I'm that bad, terrible human. It's not worthy that I thought I was. So for some of us, having that relief of saying, no, there's an explanation, there's a reason, things make sense now, that could be the healing in and of itself. Though for the large majority of us, there might be that step two, which is now that I see this, I want to begin to show up differently in some way. So, like you're
Yes.
saying, now that I feel this initial ping of attraction or this excitement, or I feel compelled to say or do this thing, I can give myself just that one moment to say, hold on, pause. Is this really what you want to say, do, act on now?
Yeah.
Or do you want to make a new choice? Because as far as
Yes.
I'm concerned, if we're talking about change, most of the time we're talking about a new choice. So
Yes.
simplifying, right, healing is, can I become conscious of all of the ways that I am being, honoring compassionately that most of them probably are an adaptation, and can I create new space to change the
Yeah.
way I show up, to
Yeah.
show up in a way that might serve me in my environment differently.
It feels like moving from reaction to action.
100%. Yeah.
And that's kind of what I put in my head, just remember, not don't react, act. And
Yes.
that simple difference is the extra 1 second, right? That you
Mhm.
need to kind of put yourself strongly, firmly where you're standing and really make a decision, as opposed to do what has been taught to you or what you've turned into a habit because of what you had to go through when you were young.
Yeah. That is the transformational pivotal moment, as far as I'm concerned. It's, can you locate yourself right here, right now? Not in the past, right? Not in the bedroom or in that early adult or that young adult home with the siblings around doing what you have to do. Can you show up here, as the adult, however many years later, with new options, new choices, new resources? And can you stand actually in that space? Because it's crazy how our mind works. I mean, we could be physically present in our adult body and as if we're that 3-year-old, right? Inside that
Yeah.
early home, reacting in that same, which is why, I mean, and I'll speak from my own lived experience, which is why I know I look a bit childish. When I'm in that, reactive place, I do stomp around like a 3-year-old, or I do, I'm not going to talk to you. And it's as if we're literally frozen in time. So all of these
Yep.
resources, all of this adult maturity and this grounded sense isn't present, because I might as well be in that early adult home when the only option was to scream and yell or to take my toys and run away.
Yeah, and in doing the book, it's like I had to look back and look at those decisions I made and the way I reacted to people. And trust me, a lot of stuff didn't make it in there, but the really good stuff is in there. And I'm like remembering things. I'm going, oh my God, I did what? Like, why would I do such a thing? And oh, that was over the top. That was ridiculous. It was like, because I wasn't angry at him. I was angry at my mother. I wasn't angry, I didn't know how to process my own pain or rejection or this, that, the other thing. And so I acted a certain way. It's very interesting. And you kind of learn and you go, oh, yeah, no, I don't want to do that anymore. Yeah.
Yeah,
Do that anymore. Yeah.
100%. And talking about pain. So another quote that I wanted to highlight, because I think this speaks to me. I know in a lot of ways you share that Lupe's lack of boundaries created walls in me. No one would or could know all of what I'm thinking or planning, my motives and desires, maybe ever. And I'm kind of honoring here the group of us that, maybe outwardly, we're not reactive or screaming or yelling or maybe even making a presence at all. Maybe we're not even connecting to other people, again, because we have what you're describing as walls, which
Yeah.
again, as far as I'm concerned, are a byproduct of, like you're describing, those early experiences with your mom in particular. So can you say a little more about kind of how you discovered these walls within
Oh my
yourself?
gosh.
And
Well, when you have a parent, and it's really funny, somebody pointed out to me the other day, it's like, or I think it was a review of the book, was like, Lupe wouldn't let Carmen have a moment of privacy,
right.
right? But she was the one with all the secrets.
Wow.
And it's
Wow.
that form of projection, right? It's that whole like, whatever they're accusing you of,
Mhm.
they have it, that sort of thing. That was exactly it. And so she did, it's awful. She went through my drawers every day when I went to school. She went through my closet. She would go through absolutely everything. I couldn't keep a diary. That's why I was writing in
Right.
my head
Mhm.
constantly. And anything I wanted to try to hide, if she were to find it, I had to make up some big story about it. What you do is, as a kid, of course, is when you have a parent like that, is you learn to build walls and you learn to lie.
Lie. Yep.
And that is, as you know, lying creates a big distance between you and the person and the people that you love when you lie. So those walls were built by her and me. So it was a huge gulf between us always. Even though I like to, I talk to my mother's ghosts, now and then. We have a much better relationship, by the way. Very one-sided. But making peace with that and seeing that it was because she was reacting to herself
Mhm.
and the secrets she was keeping and the pain that she had. And she only did it to me. She didn't do it to my siblings. So that was interesting.
Mhm. It's so, and I think what you're describing here is so many of us, I mean, those of us who grew up with siblings, while we shared the same relationship, somewhat, and environment or home at least, we can have drastically different experiences because of the
Yeah.
actual dynamics between, ourself and the different caregivers around us, and then our siblings. And I think, to speak to your point, and I have a very unique situation too, and I have two older siblings who are 15 and 18 years older than me. So as far as my experience has been, it might as well have been that I was raised in a different family entirely
Same
than
for
the
my
two of
my younger siblings. Yeah. Same thing.
them. And I know with
Yeah.
your, yeah, you have that kind of bit of a span, and it's really crazy to hear kind of the way they conceptualize and describe my parents and the childhood that they had, and how different that is for me. But I think what you're getting to in terms of lying, you're really highlighting the importance of our truth, whatever it is, our thoughts, our feelings, our experiences, and allowing them to be what we're bringing into our relationship. And for me, for different reasons, having built my own walls in childhood, being very disconnected emotionally from my family, never seeking to quote unquote worry them and increase the already overly stressed home. I became very secretive. I would hide things. And I had a family much unlike Lupe, who I had a bedroom. They never even came in as far as I knew. I was able to hide things. I had a whole
Wow.
secret life away from them. And that is another form of a wall
Yeah.
into my adult years before my mom passed. I know she didn't know me. There's a
Yeah.
lot of things that she would reference of not really knowing or being surprised by aspects of me that she would discover in my adulthood. And again, why is that? Because of that creation of there wasn't safety. It wasn't
Right.
safe for me to emotionally say, I had a bad day at school, or this is what's going on with me, mom.
Yeah.
Just like you didn't also have that safety. So what do? We adapt it. We lie, we minimize, we don't share, we sweep it under the rug, we present something different. So I know what that translated for me into adulthood was, oh, I had relationships. I spent much of my adult life in New York City, and I always had a social life, people around me. I mean, I was
Oh
never
yeah.
alone, yet
Yeah.
I might have well have felt like the most lonely person in the most crowded room
Same.
because
Same.
that lack of right intimacy and actual emotional and the walls that we build, the masks that we wear really do keep us then disconnected from the true self. And therefore we're never then going to be known by anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a goal, right? It's a goal. We're hoping one day, I'm hoping that I have enough years that I can get to that point, but having the trust with a parent, which of course the book is about all the, the lies and the secrets kept from me that really seismically changed my life, being able to know your children and know yourself and then pass that along to other generations or to siblings, grown siblings, or have these
Yeah.
conversations. I was able to have some of those conversations with my brother, and it's almost infectious once you can get people to think differently about the relationships within the family, right? I see, you've got this little ecosystem going on.
Mhm.
And once you start changing, maybe not everybody's going to like it, but if someone's receptive to the idea of you saying, look, we each grew up in a different family. We didn't even have the same parents in many ways. Because if you think about your own life and you slice it over the years, you were very different from
Mhm.
this age to this age, and your life was different. Your income, your position, your relationships, your everything. And thinking about your parents and your family that way, it helps with that ability to kind of separate yourself and have a better relationship.
Yes. And I think the next quote very opportunely really does highlight this. You write, hurt people, but that's not something that's easy to think about when you're the one being hurt, especially as a child. Yet it seemed this saying held very true for mom. Birth of trauma, I was beginning to understand the odds against her more and more, to feel more for her than against her.
Yeah, for sure. It is incredibly hard to do, but if you can do it, it's so freeing to yourself. I think part of the thing is that when think about, or when some people think about forgiveness, they think it's for the person who's hurt
Mm.
you.
Mhm.
It is so much about you just letting go of that. And a big part of me, people ask me, they're like, do you forgive your parents? And I'm like, I don't know. Nicole, don't be disappointed with me. I'm like, kind of like, I don't know. I don't know if that's the word. I think the word is I understand.
Mhm.
And that's it feels good to understand. Now, different levels of, I guess, forgiveness. I don't know. I don't know, Nicole. That's like, as you said, it's like a whole process, right?
Mhm.
That takes time and work. And, you know, I hope to get it to even more peace. And I'm hoping with this book and conversations with people like you and readers in general who bring their own situations to me, that we can all kind of move ahead in that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is through, like we were saying when we began here, it is through these conversations. It is through conversations first and foremost with ourselves. I focus a lot on our own part of the recovery journey, of the healing journey. And, before we're even sharing our awareness, our understanding, or where we are in our process, of healing with anyone else, before we do go back to the family and say, hey, this was what it was for me, and you might have had a different experience, but this is what I'm going to honor. We really do need that space, because when we do go back into that system, we don't actually know. what the reaction is that we're going to get from these others around us, because it's important, or at least it's helpful for us to acknowledge that they too are locked probably in this system, in all of these habits and patterns, right? That were an adaptation for them as well. And I think
Yeah.
something that's not often talked about, I like to think about grief a lot in terms of our own healing. And we don't think about that. I think it's counterintuitive to think about the process of grieving when we're like healing from something. But as far as I see it, that is part of it, right? For a lot of us, we are grieving those old behaviors that once did soothe us or serve us. We might be grieving relationships that are now shifting and changing as we're leaning into or speaking our truth. We're grieving aspects of ourselves, right? New ways that we're going to show up that are going to feel unfamiliar and scaring. And we're leaving behind identities, relationships and
Yeah.
structures, again, that some of us have relied on our entire life. So when we do go back, and I know I experienced this in my own journey, to these families of origin and begin to have these conversations or just bring up, these new awarenesses that we're having, sometimes it can be really challenging for
Yes.
the siblings or the other family members to begin to hear this new version of events. And I don't know if you've had a similar experience or how it was for you to be able to begin to, I should say, integrate some of these new truths, and then even more so, how it is for the family to have this now book out in the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. Oh, you asked the toughest question of all, right? This is for me the toughest because it's the most currently painful question. Um, you read the book. I made sure, there are no villains in the
Mhm.
book. I treated everybody with empathy and respect. Um, but not everybody wants their story to be told. I tried to be careful, right? I don't name names. Um, I know that my younger siblings who, were from my mother's second marriage, um, are not as receptive, right? But we're not as close. I was much, much closer with my brother. He and
Mm.
I were the Wongs. We were the first, the city kids, right?
Mhm.
Um, and in terms of my stepfather, I don't know. I don't know if he'll read it. I don't know. But here's what one of my sisters who I'm very close with is the first one after me. She's very supportive. She says, Carmen, it's your story. You need to tell your story. I have my story. We each have our stories. And that's a tremendous gift that she's given me because she understands that and gets that. And it's big, but it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable, but it's big. Even uncomfortable. I had my launch event last night, and my daughter was there, and my two nieces, the twins, the Wong twins, my late brother's daughters, and they're 18 years old. And people are asking me questions where I have to talk about some rather adult things and things that they didn't know about their father, or about me. And afterwards, we're back home and it's late and we're tired. And of course, we ordered junk food delivery and we're all sitting there to the counter, eating on the kitchen counter. And they said, I didn't know that about daddy, or I didn't know that about you, but they loved it. I said, what else? I didn't know about this. I didn't know this about Poppy Wong. I didn't know this about they loved it because to them, these stories are part of their story. It explains why their father was a certain way. It explains why our relationship was a certain way. It explains why one of them said to me, is my mom your best friend? This is my sister-in-law, my brother's wife. And I said, she's my sister. She's my big sister. And that's the truth. So living in that and handing that down, they weren't uncomfortable. They were thrilled. And not just because it was gossipy, but because they really were like, I'm getting to know
Mhm.
my Tia, I'm getting to know my mom more. And our stories. So yeah,
Well, that's such
depends on
a
who you are.
Yeah, and that's such a beautiful point. Even in the instances where the new knowings or information, might not always be pleasant. Maybe there's a difficult story or piece of information to hear. And I do think a lot of us, we prevent ourselves, we censor, we decide not to tell our
Yeah.
truth in fear of the impact. that it will have on these other people. Though, to speak to that point, even if there is a more upsetting or distressing reaction to whatever it is, there is also the knowing of it. And
Yeah.
I do think some of us don't give the generations, the children, or really anyone, to be a human on this earth is to be as far as I'm concerned, an attuned creature. So even if we
Mhm.
don't have the words or the language or the story that maybe now Carmen, come and offer somewhere in their later adult years, they have the knowing, right? It
Yeah.
lives in their body. They might have had the experience or been impacted somewhere down the generational line of that experience. So it's there. It just
Yeah.
doesn't have the words, the actual kind of cognitive understanding, which, to I think that you very beautifully illustrated with your nieces, is so incredibly important when it's then given or gifted, even if it does come with the distress. I think that shift can bring that awareness. And having gone through, and still to this day, when I first started sharing online, I remember my dad, over out of concern for my mom, who was alive at the time, and her reaction, there was a lot of conversation and questioning my way of, Nicole, why do you need to use us as your
Yeah.
example? Why do
Yeah.
we need to be,
Because
you
you're
know,
mine.
right? I'm like, well, because it's kind of the only experience I've
I like
had, but I
yeah.
understand where they came from. Again, this very protected, what will people think, place of concern. And there was many moments where I had to have that, a similar moment of like, well, whose truth is this? And how
Yeah.
important is it for me to say what it is, with the hope that even if it is distressing for my mom, my dad, or whomever it is to hear, that there is, again, going full circle, there's value in it, not only for myself, who had the lifetime of watering down my truth and telling people what they wanted to
Mhm.
hear, not to upset them. So my own being, right, has now a new outlet to live in the truth. But like you were sharing initially, this is how we change. We share stories. We see those moments of intersection, of similarity, and also those moments of difference that make
Yeah.
us, I believe, the most diverse, varied, and cooperative species that, we don't always, I think, live into. But it's people like
Yeah.
yourself that are sharing. And I'm happy we kind of came down this path, because, it occurs to me, when we're talking about ourselves, there
Yeah.
is an impact beyond ourselves that a lot of us can, I think, get caught up in. And it's not to say to do so in a callous and a cold way, like you were sharing,
No. Yeah.
empathetic, understanding, compassionate. And there's a way that these things can be discussed that I believe can be of incredible value.
Yes, for sure. Going back to what we're talking about, lies and to the things that keep us separate. When you show up with that truth, you're closer.
Yeah.
You're so much closer. Like I'm so much closer with my nieces because we speak very openly, which sometimes they're not able to with their mom or with other members of their family. They know they can come to me with anything. I'm that auntie, right? I'm that
Yes.
to you. But even my daughter, the same thing. I don't want her to have to live in a space where she cannot be herself and feel her feelings. It's something I was not allowed to do. I could not be sad. I could not be angry. I better wipe that look off my face. I better, all of these things. My goodness, it rots you. It destroys. It's really terrible. I don't want her to have to go through that. And it's amazing when you stop that. And that took training for me too, by the way. I didn't come out when she was like a baby and I was like, I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm not going to repeat anything that was ever taught to me. No. It took many years along. I wish I was who I am now at the beginning when she was a baby, but it's been, a process and I've definitely much more lean on that side of letting her but you're sad. I'm not going to say don't be sad, which would be my instant reaction, right? It's
Mhm.
not that bad, instant reaction. Those are the things that come out of me that I no reacting. Let me just take a breath. And it's huge. It really changes so much when you just take that one breath.
Life changing. And
It is. It
the
is life changing.
modeling, that we're offering, and regardless of however old we are, when we, begin a journey of knowing ourselves, of understanding, our past in a different way, or showing up newly, whatever time frame that that happens, the gift that we're giving in that moment is the gift of showing change, of acknowledging. And I think, to speak to the point of truth and lying, there's so much value. Even though I know a lot of us as humans, and parents in particular, we don't want to admit when we weren't so shiny in a moment with our child. We don't want to say, hey,
Yeah.
mom messed up and, shouldn't have screamed and yelled in that way. Yet those truthful moments where we even honor our shortcomings in as close to real time as possible are such human teaching moments, because the message we're giving our child is that, not only is it okay to be human and to say or do something that might not mean in a moment, it's also okay to be honest and to
Yeah.
share those things without, I think, the shame that
Yeah.
prevents
Yeah.
so much of us from
Shame.
sharing that.
That's the big word, shame. That's the thing, is that with the secrets, I mean, the amount of shame that lived in the house that I was raised in, that lived in the family that I was raised in. It was as if almost every decision my mother made was out of some kind of shame.
Right.
A need combined with shame led to the secrets.
Yep.
And that being like, you read that passage about me, being in my bed where she's like yelling at me and me feeling ashamed of myself, though I had done nothing wrong. That shame is that little voice that you hear. I try to turn that voice down. I pretend that there's a volume, and I try to physically imagine myself. As you can see, I'm a very visual person, as
Mhm.
but try to imagine myself turning that down and turning up the other voice. Because what I learned was, is like, I can't get rid of it completely,
Mhm.
but I don't have to let it rule my life. I don't have to let it make decisions for me. And I think that, we can even infect our friends with that. We can even, because you see, like, you're with friends and like, oh no, I can't talk about, or no, and you can feel and sense their shame, and you're like, why not? It's all right. Like, it's okay. And they relax, they feel more comfortable in themselves. You can bring so many people to that place with your story, with your process. That's what I was trying to do.
Yes. Well, Carmen, you, in my opinion, you do such a beautiful job. Your book is so eloquently written. Like I said, it's so rich, not only in your own journey, your story, to speak to everything we've been talking about here today, but really illustrating, I think, the intergenerational patterning, the societal, structures that really do get imprinted into us when we want to talk about shame, and how we carry with us into, for some of us, our lifetime, these
Yeah.
early experiences, until, of course, we, begin to look at them anew. And this can happen at any time. And the gift that you're sharing with the world and sharing your story in this way is so great. And I'm so excited to continue to watch the ripples of impact that it will have, within the collective. And I thank you for sharing your time and your presence, having this chat here with me today, and for who you are and how you show up in the world. And like I said, I believe this is how we change the world, by each of us individuals, right, living into our own stories and then creating, the future that we want to see. So thank you for the
Nicole,
part you
it's
do.
such an honor and a joy to be with you. I have to tell you, to everybody who follows you and watches you, I pretty much am one of those products of your teaching, whether it's from you or from my own therapist or such. The values that you put forth, the processes that you put forth, and everything that you do is so much of what I have done in my own life. And I can tell you, it is so incredibly life changing, not just for you, but for everyone around you. Before I get emotional, 'cause I get emotional. But thank you so much, because you are a healer. And when you share your story and your truth, you heal people and yourself. So I hope to share that with the world.
Thank you. I have chills. So thank you. Thank you. It is such a priority for me to keep, doing this, just to keep talking about it, to keep giving people this information, these resources, without even having contact with me. I do want everyone to take this information and to first get curious. And I honor everyone who even tunes in to these chats. So thank you for all of you out there listening who are, opening your mind to, I know what for some of us are new, challenging ideas. Even this concept of sharing a truth with the world, might feel really threatening and really scary. Though again, change happens when we all begin to look at things differently, and I think with a bit more of hope. So thank you all for your open minds, your open hearts. Thank you, Carmen, Rita, Wong, for how you're showing up in the world. I'm so honored to have crossed your path. We'll make sure that everyone who's listening, all of your information is in the show notes, including, of course, how to get your hands. I wish I had a hard copy of the book. I'd be holding it up, but I
Oh,
only had it
wait,
on
here we
Kindle.
go.
Yes,
Oh,
hold it
you know
up.
I've got one.
Yes, yes. So why didn't you tell me?
And there's pictures too.
I might need to come with pictures.
I'm sending you one with
Okay,
pictures.
I love hard copies. I have a library
Yes,
over here reading
it's
and
on its
learning.
way.
So
It's
thank
on its
you.
way for you.
Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you.
Sending you so much love as you continue with your launch week. And thank you for carving out your time for me today.